Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out today. I know the rain was difficult, but I think it actually might have motivated us to come inside and get warm together. So welcome to the third annual Wellesley Community Diversity Summit, sponsored by the World of Wellesley. I'm representing the World of Wellesley today as its president. And we have many board members here today that I would like to either raise your hand or stand up or represent yourself. We have Alison and Nova and Sajida. Yes. And who else is here?
Mike.
We haven't seen Russ yet. Have we seen Russ?
No, we haven't.
Okay. And Michael?
He's down the hall.
Oh, Michael. Hi, Michael. So, thank you, obviously, to the World of Wellesley board. And so we're very, very excited to sponsor a very, very important conversation today and discussion as we celebrate 50 years of Wellesley Metco. So we hope that today is an engaging conversation. We are going to spend the entire day together. The last couple of summits that we've been here, we've done breakout sessions, but I felt like today we have a really important conversation. We have wonderful speakers, panelists, and I feel like this conversation needs to be had together as a community. And so we're going to try it and see how it goes. We'll try to give you a break in between to get some more food, and obviously end the day with the Linden store. Has given us a lot of platters of sandwiches, so that should be really good and look forward to. So we want to make mention of two of our sponsors that helped us obviously offer this event for free. The first is the Rho Epsilon Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha. That's a sorority, a graduate chapter of the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority that is actually based out of the town of Wellesley. It's been meeting here for over 20 years, I believe. So, and Alison is obviously a chapter, she is. So Alison was obviously instrumental in having the chapter sponsor the event today, so we're very thankful for that. And Babson College, talked to their Diversity Inclusion Officer, Sadie Burton-Goss, who obviously sends her hellos to everyone, and has also sponsored the event today. So we're very, very happy to have Babson College and the Rho Epsilon Omega chapter. So thank you for that. So just a few housekeeping before we get started. One of the things that you see, who I want to introduce real quick, is obviously these gorgeous portraits. Last night we had an art exhibit hosted by Rob Shetterly, and Rob Shetterly is here with us today. Here he is here. That is the artist and activist who has painted these beautiful portraits. We have 10 up here, but we also have 20 downstairs that are all sort of displayed beautifully. So please, if you have time during the break or before you leave, they'll be set up until about 1:30 when we end. Please see them. And please tweet about AmericansWhoTellTheTruth.com or .org? .org. AmericansWhoTellTheTruth.org is his website. He did a beautiful, wonderful talk last night. And again, it could be, just depending on how things go today, at the end, if there's people that want to stay around, Rob would love to have a little chat and let you know a little bit about his work and some of the wonderful paintings of change makers and peacemakers, and his story and their stories. The group that was here last night was totally inspired, weren't we? People that were here last night? It was just amazing, Rob. So thank you so much for being here. And we did the art exhibit last night so we could have the portraits here today. And so we were very, very thankful that Rob spent this amount of time with us. And this is just a gorgeous backdrop to be able to have to our summit today. So we are going to be really engaging around understanding Wellesley Metco. We are celebrating our 50th anniversary, 1966. The program came into Wellesley, thankfully, by some very, very brave people, and has been here for 50 years, and we hope for a lot longer. And so today, I'm happy to just let you know that I know on the program Obviously, we should have Khalees Warnham, who is the director of K-12 MECO program for Wellesley. Unfortunately, she was unable to make it. So we did ask Grant Hightower to do our keynote today. And I have asked Dr. Lucier to introduce him today. Dr. David Lucier is the superintendent of Wellesley Public Schools. And so he would like to come up and say a few words and introduce Grant. And then once he introduces Grant, Grant will give his keynote. And then we will sort of do a little bit of moving around as we have some very exciting speakers and panelists from our community. And so we'll do a little bit of organization as we all get up here. We'll do our best with our microphone and make sure that everyone can hear us, but we might have to have people move forward to be able to hear and see. And then once we have the sort of panel conversation, dialogue back and forth, then we're going to have table conversations. And you'll be handed out questions to be able to engage with your tables, to really talk about and move this forward and think about how we individually can move our program and our community and really towards the vision of everything that we sort of learned today and really try to think about that. And think about that, how it affects us personally in our community. So I want to start the conversation with Carol and Poppy and Bill. They're going to engage the way that they would like to, and then they will invite the rest of the panel to have a conversation. We're going to do our best with the mic, and if we might have to squeeze the circle in a little bit closer, but if that sounds okay, all right. So we'll take some time here. Hopefully we can get this over here. Would you like to start? All right, let's give a hand to our panel.
Good morning. My name is Bill Kraft, and I am currently, I played a bunch of roles I'm going to run through backwards. I'm currently guidance counselor at Wellesley Middle School, and then previously I was the former elementary coordinator for the MECO program here in Wellesley. Before that, I was the MECO academic advisor in Lincoln, and then a special educator TA, actually hired by Carol Blake and Poppy Milner a while ago. I'll leave that alone. But I also wanted to speak to you, and I'm excited to be a part of the panel because I'm also a Wellesley MECO alum. I graduated the high school again with Drew and Mike. I don't know if we're going with dates, I'll leave that alone too, but a while ago. And so really excited to be here, to be back, and to be able to talk a bit about my experiences here and some of the good times. I mean, we could tear up a playground, we had a good time, made some really good connections, and there were some tough times in town, but we made some really, but the strong friendships that we had and the passion of not only the kids with whom I connected, but also the parents of those kids really made a big difference. And so one of the things I hope we'll get to address or talk about a little bit in terms of the past and connecting to the present and the future is that having had such a sort of a long history in this connection, I heard a bunch of stories about families who, before the grant was written in order to get buses for the MECO program in 1966, about families driving from Boston to Wellesley, from Wellesley to Boston, because they had that passion for connecting kids of different backgrounds and different cultural identities to the point where they were making the drive. And so it was a beautiful thing to get the grant written, but we had people who were so passionate that in 1966 or even before, when Dr. King was still marching and the civil rights movement was still happening, those families felt it was so important to make those connections that they were taking the drive. And so looking at the panel and looking around the room and having been here in Wellesley in a bunch of different roles, and a part of the MECO program and a bunch of different roles, I know that passion still exists. And I tried to find before I came here, and I didn't find it, but I was looking for a quote that I think is a quote from Dr. King that had something to do with, or was something about sort of love and kindness being sort of quieter, and sort of some of the, I don't want to say hate, but disparate sort of things that are happening being a little louder. And so in thinking about the connections that I make now with people and talking about the MECO program, I do know that same passion exists. I think sometimes those of us that are supportive are quieter than others, and if we look at the news and things that are happening around the country and around the world, that sometimes seems to be the case. And so hopefully today is a day that we can commit to thinking about that passion that existed back in 1966, considering the fact that that passion does still exist, and making it a little bit louder, and the same thing in terms of thinking about the future, the future of the program and whether or not it continues. As a faculty member, we always talk about budget cuts and what that means for losing late buses and losing faculty members and those kind of things. So we know that passion exists, and if we can make that a little bit louder and sort of get fired up again like they were in 1966, then we can continue talking about the future of the program, but it's going to be important that we summon some of that passion.
Excuse me, I'm Poppy Miller, as was already noted. My history with Medco goes quite a few years back. I began working, I guess it's now 30 years ago, in the Lincoln Medco program and was there for 17 years. Subsequent to that, I came to Wellesley as a middle school guidance counselor. Those years in Lincoln were really defining in many ways and brought together a lot of who I was in a program that I found extremely exciting and challenging. I had done work in Cambridge. I'm very involved in the schools and in the community in Cambridge, Mass, and really brought to the position in Lincoln a passion for, not just letting things go along, but looking for ways to change. So in those days when we had more funding, and that's an issue that I'm sure we will be coming back to a lot, I challenged, after a year working as a social worker, our administration and our school committee to think about creating a position called academic advisor. I was meeting with kids in small groups, boys groups and girls groups, and I was like amazed by these wonderful students who had great voices and smart as anything. And then I saw report cards and I was devastated because I said, kids are coming on this bus and coming out here, and yet somehow there's a disconnect. What is happening in classrooms that kids are not able to achieve where they might. So we began this position and over the years did a lot of work. Lincoln was one of the towns, as you know, who joined Wellesley in those tough years of creating this program with Boston parents doing all sorts of things to make this happen in the climate that existed at that point in Boston and in the suburbs. And it was an opportunity really for folks to come together, but it was not an easy time. So we, by creating this position, by looking at the challenges over those years, and certainly Lincoln was one of the towns that had the highest percentage of Boston students. We had 20%. There wasn't a classroom that did not have at least 3 or 4 Boston students in it. But over the 17 years I was there, a lot of pressure from the community as the resident population grew to really look again at this commitment and how many students and what the percentage and so forth. So we had a lot of tough times. We had a lot of tough conversations. We had a lot of forums. We had a lot of questionnaires. We had a lot of polls. And all the while, kids were getting on the bus. Parents were in great faith sending students on the bus to a community that at times did not feel welcoming. And the good news was that there was a core group of residents, parents, who really joined with the Boston parents and worked very hard. Out of that came a number of things. There was a book written, The Other Busing Story. I don't know if many of you know that book by Susan Eaton. And there were times when, rather than just talking to like-minded folks, people were doing, as was mentioned earlier, going out and talking to the folks who were not on board. And this was a very challenging thing. And yet that's really where the inroad started to happen, because there was a lot of pressure from new residents who were not as inclined to be as supportive of the project. So coming from that, I came to Wellesley, and I was a mainstream guidance counselor. I was a middle school guidance counselor working with a lot of Boston students as well as obviously many resident students, and really looked for any opportunity through activities in the classrooms, et cetera, to enhance that experience. And I guess I'll end by saying that, when we think about the history and the legacy of Medco, and who benefits really. I mean, I over the years really came to understand the degree to which the resident population really has so much opportunity to create a different world, really, when you're living in suburban communities that are still very homogeneous in so many ways. And that while the Boston students getting on that bus are really getting this extra opportunity and the education and so forth, which is great, the resident students, I mean, the stakeholders really, in many ways, are these towns. And I think that that's where we need to be thinking about how to broaden the base of support for Medco in once more hard times. I mean, I felt like every year that I worked in Medco, we were fighting a fight, you know, whether it was creating more support on the ground or whether it was going to the State House to work on the funding issue. And I don't know the specifics now, but I know that there's increased pressure to decrease the funds that are available to the MECO program with late buses and so forth. So I think that is really the challenge, ways in which, you know, particularly in the Wellesley community, there can be a real groundswell of support for this project and for all that comes with it. And that includes the work that has to happen with students and with community members to make this a welcoming and inviting and challenging in good ways experience. So those are just some of my thoughts. I'm sure I'll have some others as we go along.
Good morning.
Morning.
Where do I begin? Well, first of all, I'd like to begin by giving you an assignment. And that assignment is that I want you to think of one word, just one word, that describes why you are here this morning. So I want you to think about it. We're going to come back because I'm going to test. This is a test. And I want everyone to think about one word that describes why you are here this morning. But to start off with that, my name is Carol Blake. I've been working with MECO as MECO director for 18 years. And then as that I moved to Wellesley, become assistant principal at middle school. So then for 7 years, so that was still working with MECO another 7 years. So that you look at 25 years. I started when I was 5. But the thing that I think, and I'm very proud in the sense of having both Poppy and Bill, because we've worked together as a team for all of those years. I brought Bill in and we had arguments for many years because I kept saying, you're going back to college, Bill, you're going back to college. Poppy kept getting until, you know, it's really, I feel really proud to see him here as the counselor and moving from almost being bus monitor to now being the counselor. But out of that, what comes, my three things that I think about is team, sacrifice, and courage. Because team is that you have to have a team. You cannot do it alone. And I'm not saying who should be members of your team, but you have to have a team. Because there's no I in team. And that's the piece about important to be a team. And the three of them were my team. Because when we were in Lincoln, there was some tough times. And sometimes it's even hard for me to talk about it without sort of getting emotional. I can remember that it was a fight against MECO that not only Lincoln was going through, but many others. And I can remember at times that when we came to the school, that people were out in front of the school saying, go home, MECO. Now, this wasn't students. These were adults. And it was a battle in the town between the nouveau riche and those who had the real money, as some of the grandparents used to say there. And the kids could read well, even the second graders, and they would say, why is it that they don't want us here? Every day the kids would say, what did we do? And why is it that they didn't want us here? Now, as an adult, how do you answer that? And that was the challenge that each day we had to tell the kids, it wasn't because of you. But how do you go through telling young kids it's not because of you? So it was the work of the teams and hours spent till, at some points, my day started at 5:30 in the morning. Because I had to be in Lincoln at 5:30 in the morning to meet. And this was meeting with what we call the grandparents of the MECO program. These were the families who started MECO, who still were there. And so to make it so it wasn't a conspiracy, I had to be there before sunset to have the meeting so that we could therefore continue the day. Now, when we talk about sacrifice, as a family, there was a sacrifice for me to be there from 5:30 in the morning until 7 o'clock at night. There was a sacrifice for every member of our team here because they had families too, and they became the MECO family for many of the students to go by. So the idea of sacrifice. There's no success without sacrifice. And the question becomes, what are you willing to sacrifice? What are you willing to sacrifice? Because, MECO is a sacrifice, not only for the kids, but it's a sacrifice for the family. Can you imagine getting up every morning at 5:30 to prepare possibly breakfast for your child, put them on the bus, and be at a bus stop at 6 o'clock, rain, sun, sleet, or snow, as the mailman said, and then send your child somewhere for a 45-minute bus ride, because he or she could ride around in the city for 35 or 40 minutes before they even get towards the school, and then send them to a town that you don't know that much about, and expecting that the town's going to do the right thing for your child. And then at 4 o'clock, meet your child at the bus stop, only to prepare them again to return to school that next day. Think about that sacrifice. And what's the value that the parents do in order to just get what they would think is a better education. So MECO is not just busing. We can solve it at some point. We have to look at deeper than that. We have to look at housing. Why is it that we need a MECO program for the kids to come all the way from Boston to be here? And whose purpose is it really serving? Those are the questions. Courage. The courage is that you gotta have to be willing to discuss those issues. And willing and have the courage to discuss the difficult issues. And the difficult issue is race. I grew up in the South. I never had a white teacher before in my life until I moved to Boston in 1965. So all of my teachers looked like me. And I was good with that. Because everybody had a high expectation. When I always wanted to be a medical doctor. From 3rd grade, people called me Dr. Blake. Because the teachers called you what you wanted to be on a day-to-day basis to reinforce you can do it. We had doctors in our classroom, we had attorneys in our classroom, we had quarterbacks in our classroom, and that's what they were called, saying every day you can do that. I moved to Boston in '65, no one called me doctor. No one thought I could be. So those are the things that I talk about courage. Taking the courage and having a conversation about race, because I could have very easily been in a situation that I hate all white people. Because I had to go to, and now I'm telling my age, whenever you went to get something, ice cream, you had to go to the colored only window. If you want to do something, you had to only do that. So I could very easily grown up hating all white people. And instead, my whole life has been willing to fight the issues of race so that all kids will have the opportunity that I had. And we'll go a little deeper because I want you to still think about that one word while you're here. And I think at this point, I think we would sort of open it up and for us as a panel, just have a dialogue about what it is that's on your mind, what have you heard, or just what is your story? Take a few minutes to talk about what's your story.
Do you want everyone to introduce themselves
Yeah,
first?
as we go through and introduce themselves, and I'll start.
You don't want to start on the end? Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dawn Shira-Corin, and I actually have the pleasure of knowing many of both the presenters and others that are on the panel this morning. I come to you as a parent here in the town of Wellesley. I have a 3rd grade son that attends the MECO program, and I also have some history myself with the MECO program. I actually have 2 teenage children that attend school in Needham through the MECO program as well. I have an adult daughter who went through Belmont schools, or Belmont High School, I should say. Her elementary and middle school journey was not in Belmont, but in Belmont she got to be a part of also the MECO community and program. And I myself as well was a MECO high school counselor for 3 years in the town of Wellesley. And that was about 10 years ago, because I remember at that time celebrating the 40th anniversary of MECO and really taking some efforts to lift it up. I didn't prepare a lot today, and there's plenty of folks to speak. So I'll try to be brief, and I will be brief, there's so much to cover and so much to say and think about. Dr. Blake said to think about the one word, and my word was opportunity. I think the opportunity that Michelle provides through this, her organization, and through all of us coming together this morning to listen and talk and to lift up the conversation of MECO and race and difference and education is a huge opportunity, and an opportunity for myself to be able to sit here and be pushed to think about what is my story. She said to talk about your truth. And I talk about it a lot at home. I talk about it a lot with other friends and family members that may participate in the MECO program themselves or their children, or who may not, who might be Boston Public School parents and teachers. And so again, the opportunity to really think about how would I share what I want to say in this setting. And Mr. Hightower kind of hit it when he said, so what's my message? You know, what is it that I really want to share and say to all of you? And I think that the idea that I send my children out to towns outside of the Boston community is really because there's an opportunity for them. There's an opportunity of resources, and I guess when I think about it, less stressors that teachers might have to deal with when they're teaching in an urban community that has more poverty. And so really when I get to the core of why do I make this choice, it's because of the opportunity again. The opportunity of resources and the opportunity for my children to be able to access a curriculum that in many cases might be more rigorous and might be more flavored, if you will, with gym and art and math and library, and I don't have to worry about those things being something that's part of their everyday experience. Sacrifice is huge. There's so many different sacrifices, as Dr. Blake again mentioned, and not only the bus ride, but the reality that you send your children out to a community where you're not sure if they're going to be welcomed, you're not sure how people perceive their difference with all of the stereotypes and messages that we have every day coming at us, whether it was during the 40th celebration or in the era that we're living in now, in the 50 years later. And so there's a sacrifice on both ends, and I guess the biggest message that resonated for me as I thought about what I wanted to say is that I think it's really important that the students of color that come out to this community, as well as the students that are here, have an appreciation that, you know, that coming from Boston and who they are is not a bad thing, right? To lift them up and help them to feel welcomed and acknowledged in who they are and what they're capable of. I think this idea that I sacrificed to come here, I could, if I chose to send my children to Boston, I could find a place that would be okay for them. And they would be all right, just the same. It would just be different sacrifices, and it would be different sacrifices that we'd have to make and that they would have to make. And I think that it's really important that all of the children have the opportunity to be perceived as able to succeed, able to do well, able to achieve, and regardless of where they are, that can happen. And it matters what the adults are doing to help that presence, help them feel welcomed, help the families feel welcomed. And I guess I'll add to that just to bring some clarity. I think about both of recent and in the past children who have left a MECO town for one reason or another. And I wonder what the perception is of everyone, both the MECO students or students in the MECO program that remain in the school, as well as the teachers and other students. Why did that child leave? And is, you know, going back to Boston a bad thing? Or, and so the idea that we give attention to all the positive things that are a part of the process, and that we continue to make sure that the negative connotations of why we make the choices we make are talked about, and that they are addressed, and that we sort of check our understanding and make sure that we have all the right information, and that we're giving that information to our children as well and helping them understand it. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Mike Brady, and in thinking about Dr. Blake's question, the easy answer for me to share with you all would be friendship, right? That would be the easy and true answer as to why I'm here. I think you had a glimpse of that through Grant's speech this morning, and I don't think even if I had the mic, and I promise that I won't, but if I had the mic to 10:45, I don't think I could do justice to the friendship that I have with Drew and the relationships that I have with Drew's family. So I'm gonna actually put a different hat on for a second and be a typical social studies teacher and say that there are many one-word answers that I could give to your question and share a few of those one-word answers in addition to friendship. Because I think I also am here in a role as social studies department head, as a member of the Wellesley Public Schools, as somebody that is invested in the work that we're doing, our part in this town's effort to make Wellesley, and when I say this place, I mean the nation and the world a better place. So I feel like I have a professional responsibility, and that is also part of the reason why I'm here. And another one-word answer would be dad. I'm raising 3 young men at home, and I want them to go out into the world charged with the sense of responsibility that they should have towards fellow human beings, and an appreciation of the dignity of every human being alive. And I take that part of my persona really important. It's really important to me. And probably telling that this is actually when I'm most nervous, talking about this right now. Just because, we talk about trust and courage, that's come up a few times in terms of parents placing their children on buses. I think I want my children to go out into the world that they're going to be part of, having that trust in other people, that trust in themselves, and that sense of courage to address wrongs that they see, and be confident in their ability to show agency towards changes that they want to make. And so I'm here as dad, and I felt great pride in saying that this morning. My typical Saturday involves basketball with my children, and usually ferrying them to games. And my youngest was off to his game today, and he said, "You coming today?" I said, "No." I said, I'm giving part of a presentation this morning. And he had a different smile. He smiles normally when I come to his games, but he had a different smile today. So I'd say, dad, role, and friendship are certainly three words that come to mind as to why I'm here.
Good morning. My name is Drew Kelton. I just want to say thank you to Michelle for putting this together. I've always admired Michelle's commitment to this mission, because it's not easy, and it's not easy in a community like this sometimes when you are running up against roadblocks or people not attending things. And so I just want to say thank you, and continue this great work. And I'm just happy to be a small part of it. I also like to thank the people that are here. I mean, it's a rainy, dreary Saturday morning where this is the best sleeping time ever. right? But you guys came out here and because this is important. And so I just want to really say thank you to them. Like Mike, he and I have been friends since 5th grade. And we're like an old married couple sometimes, because I was thinking those same words, right? I could have landed on friendship. But I think when I think about my experience at Wellesley, I really keep coming back and landing on relationships. And those relationships that I've formed have really transformed me in some way, right? So, going to Wellesley Public Schools, great education, all that stuff, right? So that's really, that's the easy stuff. My folks knew that. My dad was the METCO coordinator. So from 75 to 78, my dad was the MECO coordinator. That's how I got involved in Wellesley MECO. And, but we knew we were gonna get a good education, you know, but what it really taught me was how to develop relationships, and relationships in all different sectors of society. And so it's really, I feel like those relationships have prepared me for this moment. You know, this moment, whether it's here, just sitting on this panel, whether it's as assistant principal at the high school, whether it was as interviewing for social studies position at the high school, whether it's to be a dad, those relationships have helped me, you know, sit here today. So I'm extremely thankful and grateful for that. I look forward to this dialogue because I'm really interested to hear what everybody else has to say about Wellesley MECO and how we can continue this partnership. And finally, I would also like to echo Grant's challenge. When you leave this room, we should have, you know, however many people here, allies that are going out into this community and your community and really challenging, in your own way, really challenging what's going on out there. What's going on out there? And that this notion that we are, if I say to one of my friends, or they ask me a question about, and I was looking at the back of that, like Black Lives Matter, that doesn't mean that I'm against all other lives. I mean, the silliness of these things, right? So I just think that we need to go out there armed and ready to challenge these false narratives that are out here. And last thing I would say is that I am so proud of my relationship with Mike and our families. You know, I get emotional when I think about it. I mean, 5th grade, and everybody, you know, they kind of think like, oh, I was the MECO kid, and Mike's family introduced, you know, we were introduced through, because I was the MECO kid, and this was like, he was my host family. That wasn't the case. Actually, he moved into town. He moved into Wellesley, and if I'm not mistaken, he was districted to the wrong school.
No, so close.
Yes.
Close. I moved to Wellesley. It was the 7th move in 11 years for me. We just bounced around a lot and went to Upham, and then they redistricted. I was one of 3 kids from Upham that didn't go to Bates, that went to the then Brown School, and so it felt like another move, you know, all over again, and had the good fortune of I guess some experience of moving around a lot and being probably more outgoing than I am now, and being picked to be on a team, you know, fairly early in 5th grade by Drew.
Yeah, we played with basketball. I see a kid over there. I'm like, hey, you want to play? And that was really the start of our friendship. And I would just say it's really about relationships. That's what I'm most proud of. And like I said, I'm really just proud of our friendship and the way our families, from our parents on down to our kids, how we are just linked in each other's lives. So I'm just, thank you.
I was breathing a sigh of relief that I wasn't following Grant. Now I have my 2 colleagues. Wow, you know, lots of. I'm David Luce here, superintendent of schools. Lots of things going through my mind just listening to each of these things. Great comments that have been said. I also want to go back to Carol's question. You know, my word is responsibility. That's the word I feel, and I want to juxtapose that word with another word that too often I think defines the last 2 decades in education, which is accountability. You know, accountability is often defined as sort of whose throat to choke, who am I going to blame, right? Whose fault is something? It's an external feeling. It conjures up a sense of someone else's diminishment, someone else's fault. And boy, just follow the national political scene right now and you'll see that term reinforced in every ad, in every debate, in every editorial. when I think about responsibility, I think of that as something much more personal, something intrinsic, something you feel a deep connection to, something for you to do, to get busy at. And when I think about these issues of race and diversity, I often think about those two terms often representing the bookends of where conversations tend to be on any piece of those issues. And the challenge that I often think about is how do we move that conversation from accountability into one where we all feel some responsibility, instead of looking to others to try to solve things. And clearly, that has to be there somewhere. More powerfully, we begin with what can I do? What's my role in all of this? And I feel like that's something that we try to instill in our students through our curriculum. It's something we try to instill in our staff. A year ago, I had an opportunity with a group of policy folks from Massachusetts to go and visit Singapore, all over the other side of the world, and to study their education system. And one of the things I was really struck by was how that sense of responsibility was manifest in the schools that I was visiting, and in virtually every conversation that I had. There was a real visceral sense in Singapore that teachers are nation builders, literally. And you would see it in slogans in schools. You would have a conversation with a first-year teacher or a third-year teacher or the principal, and they really have this keen sense that the work they were doing was building the nation. And I felt like that was such a powerful way to think about that sense of responsibility that drives their practice. And so that's something I continue to think about around these issues, not just what my responsibility is personally, but how do we help people feel that sense of urgency through their own responsibility.
Allison leaned over to me and said, "Don't be good." So,
Speak
this is for Allison.
Thank you.
So I thought of 2 words, and I'll reflect on them with the 2 hats that I feel like I'm here with. And those 2 words are funding and friendship. I'm about to say
Oh,
who I am.
good.
From a funding perspective, I am Betsy Kim Yachty, and I'm president of Friends of Wellesley Metco. And from a friendship perspective, I'm Betsy Kim Yachty, parent of 2 children in the Wellesley Public Schools. I have a 9th grade son and a senior. And it's through my 9th grade son, when he was in kindergarten, that I got involved with the Metco program. So I'll start with funding. Nobody's talked about money yet, but money is an issue in this. And people are often very confused about funding for Metco. And so I think one thing that's important to know is that it's a state-funded program. So the school district gets funds, correct, for all of the students who attend here. So when people say, oh, it's taking resources away, well, it's actually bringing resources in to Wellesley, the program is. The other aspect of state funding is that, as we know, in government budgets, that it doesn't always go up, as it should. So as costs go up, funding, when it stays flat, which has done for many, many years, creates a big gap. And that's where Friends of Wellesley Metco comes in. We've been around for many, many years. Maybe Allison, the prior president, could tell you exactly how long.
66.
Since 66. And we've been a 501c3 for about the last dozen years or so. And so we are a board made up of parents from Boston and Wellesley and teachers. And our primary mission, the way we were founded, was to provide funding, raise and then provide funding for students to get the most out of the opportunity that going to school in Wellesley provides. So that has been things like supplementing funding for tutoring programs, for summer enrichment academically over in the summer, for 8th graders to go on trips with their peers and allow that to be more easily accessible over April break. For seniors to get grants to help contribute toward college, to make that more accessible. So funding has been part of our mission, and we send out an appeal letter every fall. We remind people then in early spring. We've been very fortunate. The town of Wellesley has given us numbers, charity numbers for the Boston Marathon these last several years. And so as a board, we really wrestle with how are we good stewards of these funds and help support the program and the students. That's a part of our mission, but frankly, I think the more important aspect of our mission is in the name Friends, Friends of Wellesley Metco. And that's where I think that my keyword is friendship, why I'm here. The friendship that my children have had through their relationships, the friendship that I have through my relationships of board members, parents, many of you who are here on the panel and in the audience, to me, this is not merely an education program. This is about building relationships. And to me, that's the future challenge of this, where we go from here the next 50 years. We've talked a lot about the friendships that kids have, and clearly the relationships that have formed over the years have changed people's lives. I feel like one of the goals that Friends of Wellesley Metco has is to work on relationships between adults and parents. Because our children will be more successful when we as adults are more closely connected. When we don't see this as a kids program, an educational program, when we see this as a family program. There's a reason why Family Friends is no longer called host families. We don't want to be hosts. We want to be friends. We want to be invited to Boston. We want to have times other than once a month that our kids get together. We want to really connect, get to know each other, and enrich all of our lives through those friendships. Tonight we're having a social. We haven't had one, Friends of Wellesley Metco, for about 1.5 years, and the last one we had was in this room. And you know, there was space in the room, put it mildly. There was some space. Tonight we are having it in Dedham, and we decided very intentionally to find a place that was halfway between Boston and Wellesley. And we wanted to keep the ticket prices low, so we found a really inexpensive place. It doesn't have a kitchen, has kind of one bathroom, because we thought maybe 70 or 80 people will show up. We have closed down the RSVPs. We are at about 170 right now. That is remarkable, and I'm nervous. When Grant was talking about courage, I was like, I'm feeling like I need some courage because it's raining. This is going to be a full house, but I'm thrilled and I'm excited. I think we have 50 teachers coming. I think we have 80 parents from Boston coming. Like it's going to be remarkable no matter what. No matter if you get a little bit of food and have to wait in line a few minutes for the bathroom, it's going to be remarkable. And I'm so proud in anticipation of the friendships that we're going to continue to foster tonight. Thank you.
You didn't stink, Betsy, so that's too bad. My name is Alison Sergeant, and thank you, Michelle, for putting this together. I agree, this is a really remarkable turnout, and I love seeing old friends and new faces. My role here is multifaceted. I think a lot of people wear many hats among the Metco community. We all seem to love to get involved in lots of different ways. One of the sort of asterisks near my name is that my father-in-law, David Sergeant, was the chair of the school committee when the Boston Metco program was being floated as an experiment, a social experiment, to come to Wellesley. And he was a really courageous moral leader. He took it upon himself to, along with his other committee members, to bring this idea of change to a town that wasn't maybe very comfortable with change. Wellesley was doing just fine in 1966. It was an affluent town. It was a town well educated. Schools were excellent, and the country outside was in turmoil. Wellesley was a place of stability, and you understood what you got when you moved to Wellesley. He was willing to shake it up a bit, and that's not easy in a town like Wellesley back in the day. And I'm so proud to be his daughter-in-law. He was a hard ass, and he was a great orator and speaker, and he could clearly convey his ideas. So by almost his sheer force of personality, he was able to get his ideas across. And so that was one of the reasons that I got involved in METCO. So consequently, I became a family friend. We had two great kids from Boston come and be part of our family for many years. Then I became the Family Friends Coordinator, and I think Kate may be talking about the Family Friends program. There's always been a bit of a misunderstanding about Family Friends and Friends of Wellesley METCO. It's nice that the word friendship comes up over and over, but there are some distinct differences between those two, and it's good to understand that. Then I became the President of Friends of Wellesley METCO. Betsy has been my most able successor. And I guess it's a couple of things I want to say, and I'm just going to pass it right along. A couple of things I'd like to, it would be great to talk about today, is that I think there's, what I've learned in my role as president and kind of mouthpiece for the program, is just a great deal of misunderstanding about what METCO is in this town to this day. It's incredible to me how people just don't really understand it. They maybe have a passing understanding, but the depth of understanding is not clear to many residents. And so my challenge to you today is either ask us and get more educated yourself if there are things that you don't know. Please ask. There's a lot of things that are a little bit unclear, and so please feel free to ask us. And then once you understand, please take that message out to the community, because I think unless everybody really understands what the core of this is about, I think people don't understand how students get into the METCO program. Well, that's a really important distinction, and people should understand that. The other thing I hope we touch on today is a little bit about how students are doing going forward who are currently in the program, and how there still is, we're still wrestling with some real disconnect between our resident students and Boston students, and I find that very discouraging. And so I think, 2016, here we are, 50 years later, and we're still talking about the kids maybe sitting at a different lunch table, or issues that feel pervasive and discouraging to me. So I'm hoping that we can talk about that in a way that makes us be able to move forward. So thank you very much.
Wellesley still has a long way to go in the fight for equality. This Diversity Summit proved that this town is willing to come together and hold a dialogue about improvement. The World of Wellesley has spearheaded this battle in equality for the entire town of Wellesley. The services and events that they provide are imperative in coming together as a community and making a change. Wellesley will stand together and fight against racism.